Okay, I love this image, and I wanted to put it onto my PowerPoint. So I'm happy to be here at the ISPS US National Conference, and thank you all. I'm just very, very honored to be here. My talk today is going to be about peer support facilitates change and improving a quality of life. And I want to let you know that in order for me to get peer support today, I've included in my presentation, as you'll see, uh, my fellow colleagues and friends who are women survivors of the movement. And I'm going to share a little bit about them, but in my talk, I just feel so much support. I feel today I need their support. So there we go. So my story, well, my story started in the early to late 80s. And if anyone was around of mental health in the 80s, you will know that there was no recovery discussed. Nobody got out of psychiatry per se. For me, I was in a hospital for a year because the thinking was that we couldn't be in the community, that a most we can aspire to is to have a mental illness and just be in the hospital for the rest of our lives. And that we had a chemical imbalance. The 80s was a very tough year. But during that time, I did eventually get discharged and I went into supported housing in the Bronx. I was invited to a conference called Self-Help Vision in Troy, New York. This was like 1988. And I was considered, I'm gonna put quotes, high functioning. And so I was able to go to this conference. Little did I know that this conference had a lot of my heroes and sheroes there. So people like Joseph Rogers was there at night, Dick Gelman, George Ebert, Judy Chamberlain, Howie the Harp, and many others. And I was just blown away because I knew there was something different than what I was experiencing and what I was exposed to in being in the mental health system. Is this it for my life? When I went to this conference, I found out that here are consumer survivors, ex-patients developing their own alternatives, having self-definition and self-determination, and just kind of saying like, because I said to Judy Chamberlain, I said, well, who's allowing you to do this? And she said, oh, no one, we're empowered to do it. And that whole conference changed my whole life. So I want to say here that the consumer survivor ex-patient movement, as well as peer support, has really changed my whole life. I really don't know where I would be if I wasn't exposed to this conference of these people creating alternatives to the mental health system and fighting for rights. So when I came back to the Bronx, I was so excited. I no longer was able to be in this paradigm of mental health diagnosis and I'm never going to get well. And these are the images that were given to me. The most you can aspire to is to be in a low-paying job or be on Social Security disability benefits. That's it. You can, never be in a relationship. You can never be married. You can never have kids. Nothing. And I was sad about that. And at the same time, I was, going through my own inner discrimination and stigma from all of these messages. So this exposure helped me with consciousness raising. And my conscience was raised, not going back. And so I was able to, I created a support group called Interexpressive Support Group in the Bronx with a couple of people from the residents. I was able to do it there, but then the staff got wind of it and I was empowering too many people. So that stopped, but I continue to do it and find a space um, in the community. So I'm here to say that as we go on into my talk, that I feel like I learned a lot from the movement. The movement has done so much to get me here, but to also get others where they want to go in their journey in their lives. So I want to start off. This is the woman psychiatric survivor Janet Foner. She was my dear friend. She's no longer with us. She transitioned and passed away in 2019. But she was very instrumental in my own support. She was the International Liberation Reference Person for Mental Health Liberation. What a great word. Liberation for the Global Reevaluation Counseling. She worked very, very hard on herself, and she worked with others around the globe. She continued to be on the board of MindFreedom International. Most people don't know that she was also a co-founder and former co-director with David Oakes in 1990 to 2000, when MindFreedom was called Support Coalition. And during this time, there was no social media. So we had AOL, we had a modem, if you can remember. And I was just, on their listserv and getting all continued messages to help me through how I want to look at my life and how I want to move on in my own recovery. So MindFreedom, for those of you who may not know, is an organization of psychiatric survivors, people who are fighting for human rights and for choice in the mental health system and for social change. We have people who call us when they feel they are being forced into services that they no longer want, they don't want. And we do everything that we can to support them, to help them. But I also want to say that Janet Foner was instrumental in helping us in MindFreedom to create Alternatives Providers Directory, which is on our website, so that people, providers who are really kind of working on changing themselves, changing the paradigm to healing and wellness from being forced into treatment that you didn't ask for. So we worked on it a long time. She was very, very organized. We also had a couple of alternative conferences. I think MindFreedom might have been one of the organizations that was actually started to focus on alternatives, like Peer One Respite and Soteria, like coming off of psych drugs. And we had a couple of conferences called Creative Revolution. And, we had people on our board in MindFreedom. One of them is Al Galves. And we had some other people outside that really wanted to help work on this. So she definitely someone that I always think about and has been a strength for me for years. So Judy Chamberlain is also a women's psych survivor. She's no longer with us. But she wrote this article called The Ex-Patients Movement, Where We've Been and Where We're Going. And this article is on the National Empowerment Center website, powertoyouth.org. And I'm just putting a quote, but the article is worth the read to read it all. And a lot of things that you read, even though it's dated, is still kind of happening now. Language is different then, but it's still happening. So what the quote that I love in this article is, self-help is a concept, not a single program model. The concept is a means by which people become empowered and begin to think of themselves as competent individuals as they present themselves in new ways to the world. By its nature, self-help combats stigma, because the negative images of mental patients ultimately must have, I'm not seeing my slides. Just 1 second, let me just, I don't want to cut off. Let me see if I can move this over. Okay. Because the negative images of mental patients ultimately must have the reality of clients managing their own lives and own program. This is a concept that at the time was radical, because we know that in Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, and Narcotics Anonymous, that people were thought of that they can support each other based on mutual experience. But someone who has a mental health diagnosis wasn't really thought of as, really seeing themselves as people who can become empowered as they find new ways of being in a group, or just the concept of self-help that, I could just listen to your story and identify with it. Doesn't mean I went through the same thing, but it does mean that I'm not alone, and I can share, things that I've gone through. I also can learn from you of what you're going through. And then what's beautiful about this quote, I can, think of myself differently. I can create something new. I can present myself new, in new ways to the world, other than what the mental health system might see me as. I think it's beautiful. I still do today. So Judy Chamberlain, everybody, she's here with me today. Okay. So here's Sally Zimmerman. I want to give credit to Vespa Moore, who did this wonderful artwork of Sally Zimmerman. It's beautiful. And so what she says is, our definition of self-help came from the mental patients movement. It was called that as well. For us, self-help is advocacy and activism based. Self-help is about freeing ourselves. It goes beyond breaking down the walls of institutions, but freeing our minds. Sally Zimmerman, psychiatric activist. And this is really true. I learned from Sally and others in our movement that we want to free ourselves from other people deciding who we are based on a diagnosis or perceived mental health diagnosis, that we need to be free, free of thought, and free of, to be autonomous, to have self-determination, as she always used to say. We need that in order for us to survive and to be in the world. It has to be on our terms. Oh, 1 second, sorry. So here's some other pictures of Sally, and she's done a whole lot. She was a true survivor, and she worked in California mental health clients, and now I think it's California Mental Health Peer Support Organization. She tirelessly worked with her peers to make change, and through peer support and legislation, and that we would be recognized as people who can manage our own lives, that we should be here doing what we do best, is supporting each other and fighting for our rights. And I just I love seeing her. I love her smile. I miss her very much. She also passed away in August of this year. And I want to say, and I'm very honored to have received the Sally Zinman, you know, Lifetime Achievement Award from NIASPR's Harvey Rosenthal and his board at the NIASPR's conference in September. So I'm, beyond words to even be able to receive that. I never thought I would. I always thought I would be with Sally. I would be talking to Sally all the time. So I like to show pictures of us. So you'll see a lot of pictures. So here's Darby Penny. She passed away last year in October of 2021. And she wrote an article, Who Gets to Define Peer Supporters in Men in America? It's a good article. But here's a quote from her. The definition of peer support should be straightforward. A peer is an equal, someone with who shares demographic or social similarities. Support expresses the kind of deeply felt empathy, encouragement, and assistance that people with shared experiences can offer one another within reciprocal relationship. So a lot of times, peers who are facilitating groups are looked at as the one that has all the wisdom and the knowledge. But this is not true. We all have the wisdom and the knowledge. We all can share, encouragement and assist each other and share our experiences and learn from each other. And the facilitator's role, and I've been doing facilitator training like forever, is to really trust that the person has the wisdom within themselves to bring it out, to heal their life, that we don't have all the answers. The answers come from within, but we can provide an atmosphere where you're able to share who you are and what your strengths and your triumphs have been in your life. So that's the beauty of peer support. Sherry Mead, who's still with us, but her quote, and she's founder of Intentional Peer Support, IPS, as peer support in mental health proliferates, we must be mindful of our intention. Social change. It is not about developing more effective services, but rather about creating dialogues that have influence on all of our understandings, conversations, and relationships. And I believe this to be true. I think that peer support is very, very important to us and to me, and to everyone. It's not just about, developing service, but I want to say for the women that I just, women's psychiatric survivors I just showed you, is that these services are something that meant a lot to them in their lives and created this in order to support themselves, but also to support others. It's not something that can be taken lightly. It took years, and I remember with Sherry, to really work on intentional peer support to where it is today, national. And I want to also say, I don't have them here, but I want to give kudos also to Mary Ellen Copeland, who developed WRAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And she too, was going through her own depression and struggles and just decided, what is it that I need in order to get support and to heal? And maybe I'll develop a plan of things that mean something to me when I'm not feeling well. And I think it was brilliant. And the rest is history. WRAP facilitator training. We just had one in New York City. We're going to have some WRAP facilitators that I'm very excited about. It's international. And I want to mention Patricia Deegan, who's another innovator and creator who's done so much around common ground, shared decision making. She's done so much around um, assimilation of hearing voices. She's done so much. So thank them both for the work that they have done and continue to do. So I want to talk a little bit about, peer support values. So as I mentioned before, self-determination is important. Validation. So even if you don't know which way you're going, you may be having a tough time, or maybe in some emotional distress. What helps, and what has helped me, is that no one's saying, well, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or according to your mental health diagnosis, this is how you really supposed to be feeling, this is how you're supposed to be acting. But instead, with peer support, someone, my fellow peer, can just be listening to me, talking about whatever, and maybe not making so much sense, but just telling my truth, and they're just listening. And that makes a world of difference. Mutuality, things that you share together, experiences. Hope. Hope it's a cornerstone of everything. You can't always see hope, but you know that it's there. It's just like you don't always see the air you breathe, but you know it's there, right? So hope is always there. Trust is important for peer support. A value is that we trust the people that are supporting us, helping us heal, that we trust them, because the trust goes a long way. And sometimes when when you don't have that trust, it's very, very hard to get it back in peer support. And of course, advocacy is important. Advocacy is energizing. You're advocating for yourself. You also could be advocating for others. It takes you off of yourself into, supporting others. And this year, and I know this has probably been said many times, but we were talking about self-care. What does self-care mean to you? What does community care mean? And this was all during COVID. How do you deal with your own crisis? So that is also a part of our values. Autonomy. You want to be autonomous. Healing, I think, is a goal. Whatever is that you need to heal, and it's always a continued healing. And it's just so important that we're focusing on that. And that we have transparent, and I talked about before, reciprocal relationships, that it's not always me or the other person going in and saying, I have all the answers to all the, challenges you might be going through. I really don't. You do. So I can learn from you. You can also learn from me. We can learn from each other and try to work it out and create something new for ourselves. And mental and physical integrity, I can say, is very important. And what this means is you want to have control over your own mental status. So anything that you do not want to be a part of your body, like meds, and I'm not saying that people who want to take meds, I think it's a choice, but if you don't have a choice and your mental integrity is being compromised, that's a problem. And also physical. We have a right to have the integrity to say, I need this, I don't need that. Please, respect my wishes. and respect who I am. And just go beyond the paradigm that, oh, you have a mental illness, you have a diagnosis. So that means you don't know what it is you want to do in your life because you have that label. And for me, I have to tell you that having a mental health diagnosis did not help me heal and to feel good about myself. I always felt something about me was literally sick. What is going on with me, just me, that I'm given this label and I don't feel good about it. You know, I'm just an illness. So I'm not Celia anymore. I'm not a mother. I have a son now. Um, I'm somebody's daughter and sister. So all I am now is just an illness. So I know for others that helps them in their own recovery, but for me, it has not helped. So just want to mention that. And our personal story is always important to share with others and the lived experience. And always to know that we're always on a journey of discovery. What I knew then, I know more now than I knew in the 80s, but I'm still learning and I'm still growing. And always know that there's always growth in your life and things you can learn. And trauma informed. Before we weren't even using trauma. Like, women and others could not go through trauma or be re-traumatized by being in the mental health system. That it didn't really make any sense. But we know that, trauma is really a part of our lives. And we have to work through that and work with people who want to help us get through the trauma. Doesn't mean it always goes away, but it, kind of evolves in our life. And I want to give some examples of peer support. Well, first of all, Janet Foner was such a big support to me that once a month, in addition to us working together with MindFreedom, we would just call each other just to support each other. Once a month call for an hour and a half. And, I would tell her how I'm feeling and what things that are going on with me. And she would, tell me how things are going. We would learn from each other. We would, sometimes she had resources like, hey, why don't you, go on this website or read this book or, and that really gave me so much support. Now, and she's also a good friend of mine is Laura Van Tosh, someone who also is in the consumer movement, but a very dear friend of mine. We catch up every month, we talk, even if it's for a few minutes. That all is about peer support. And one other example I want to give that I think sometimes we don't always understand or we feel like we have to do something. But I work with a peer specialist in New York City, and I'm going to call him John. And every day to work, he takes the subway in Brooklyn. And he meets up with a person who is homeless, and he brings him coffee and soup from like Wednesday to Friday on his way to work. And he has a little conversation with him and says, how you doing? Now this guy, person who's homeless, was heavily on drugs, heroin addict, and just was in the subway. Now, us all being human, we look at this, and sometimes we say, well, we got to get him out of the subway, or, we got to get him housing, or, But John, the peer specialist, said to him, would you like any help, any professional help, any peer support? And he said no, he wasn't ready for that. Now, John could have said, well, I think you need this, you need these services, you know. And he just said, okay, and continue the conversation. Okay, have a great day. And after a while, weeks, months, going to see John in the subway station, he decided, the guy decided that he was going to go into rehab. And the reason why he's able to do that, because John understood about homelessness, because at one time in his life, he had experience with being homeless. So he was able to go with the flow of what the person said they wanted or needed. He didn't have to agree with it, but he wasn't telling him that he needed to, you know, be in services, or, you know, maybe you need to be in an emergency room, or, you know, none of that. And this is the beauty of peer support that people don't understand. People heal and decide what they want for their lives in their own time. And sometimes the way our world is, we don't have time for that. Or in mental health, we don't have time for that. Oh, you're in crisis, so, you know, we have to get you out of the crisis. But that person we may see that person in crisis, but that person clearly isn't in crisis. And there's also a really strong homeless support network that, you know, people kind of ignore, but it's there. So you know, when I heard about this, I just teared up, because peer support is alive and well. And I know for me, I would want someone to listen to me. I wouldn't want people to judge and decide based on their own perceptions and their own experiences and their own medical knowledge what I need to be doing, rather than working with me and speaking to me and having a conversation. So peer support versus system change. I spent a long time figuring out who I am and how, if I want to stay out of the mental health system, how am I going to do that? So that means I have to know more about myself. I have to know what my strengths are and limitations are, and really accept myself for all that I am. And I continue to do the consciousness raising and to be a part of the movement where people are, you know, working on their own journey in their own lives, and working on rights. And I want to continue to be a part of that. The exposure is very important. So, you know, for me, when I mentioned earlier about the Self-Help Vision Conference, if I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't exposed to that. And sometimes exposure is all you need to make a change in your life. And for me, that conference made a change. I have never gone back. And I truly believe in peer support. I use it in my life. I help others. But here's what happens in you know, versus system change. And it's still happening, and we're in 2022. Is that all the work that I have done, just alone, give me an example, and I go in and I talk to, you know, a social worker or a psychiatrist, and they say, well, that's really nice. That's so nice. You did peer support. That's great. But the real support is not peer support. The real support is the medical model, treatment services. And, you know, peer support, you can have that on a side, like a side menu or something like that. It's very, it's just ironic. You know, why can't peer support be what it is, and then treatment services be what it is? Why is the services coming to change peer support or dismissing it as if it's not a part of the healing, or it can't really heal like the mental health system, the medical model can. And we, and all of, I don't have to, I don't want to preach to the choir, but I know that we know this, and it continues to happen, and it does a lot of damage. So it does damage to me, my fellow peer supporters, that they are working on their recovery every day in their journey, and they're helping others. And then being told that, oh, that's nice, the real help is going to be therapy, it's going to be medication, it's going to be whatever, and that's it. Now, when you go into other health treatment, cancer treatment, here that's the treatment, whether you agree or not agree. But they encourage you to go to cancer support groups, do aromatherapy, that they're going to do. They don't go in and let me change that to fit, what we're doing with chemotherapy or radiation. But why doesn't that happen in the mental health system? Why? To me, the goal is to be in wellness, to be in healing, and to get out of the system, and to live your best life, however life you want to live. That's the goal. That's it. So I just think that, we have to continue to fight for the right to be who we are, to be autonomous, for self-determination. These are all important values in our lives and in the lives of working with the system. I am about system change, and I think we need to recognize it, keep fighting it. But I have to tell you, it comes at a toll at times. You go back and you internalize things, and it's like, oh my God, it really isn't you. It's the perception of who you are. It's the perception of what peer support means. And, can peer support be involved, as well as, if treatment services? Why does it have to be either or? Can we have alternatives? The alternatives I know works. I know a lot of you may feel the same way. Why is that? And that is, there's many things I'm not going to go into that are damaging, but that piece, that peer support really isn't the best help you can get. The best help you can get is going to be through the mental health system, and that's it. And so that I think is an issue that I think not just me, but a lot of you work in the system and who also work in the alternatives fight all the time. Our rights are important. Again, we have the right to be who we are. And here's my girl and my friend. She's no longer with us, Jackie McKinney. And she was a survivor of trauma, addiction, and homelessness, and the psychiatric criminal justice system. She was a family advocate specializing in issues affecting African American women. She was a founding member, along with me, of the National People of Color Consumer Survivor Network. And why was this important at the time? Because as a movement, we've noticed that there weren't a lot of people of color involved. There weren't always a lot of people from the LGBTQIA community. That was important. So we really had to work together in order to recognize that we should be a part of these issues, a part of the movement. And it's okay to be different. We don't have to be the same. We don't have to think the same. We just have to be accepted for who we are. I really loved doing the being a part of the National People of Color Consumer Survivor Network. I want to say that Jackie was a good friend. She was a mentor. She was a wonderful speaker. She was like a Maya Angelou of our movement. She was incredible. And there's times we would talk on the phone, and she would mentor me. She's always proud of me. She's tough at times, like all the other women I mentioned. They wouldn't be who they are if they weren't, with so much integrity and so much to share with all of us. And I'm so grateful that I really got to meet Jackie. She I'll never forget who she is. I got to go to a lot of conferences. At that time, I was going everywhere. A lot of us were going to national conferences. On the right side with Jackie, I was speaking with her in Eugene, Oregon. MindFreedom, David Oakes, and the Opal Project asked us to come in and asked me to talk about my experiences with the movement, and Jackie's experiences with trauma. And I remember during the whole time, but this is also on YouTube, you can watch it. She was always holding my hand, holding my wrist and just giving support. And it just always made me feel good. She's one of our elders of the movement. I respected her as an elder. I feel like I stand on her shoulders. Judy Chamberlain, Sally, Darby, lots of Sherry, Sally Zinman. These women were fierce, and I learned so much from them. We're watching them by reading their, articles that they might have, or reading their manuals, or hearing them speak. I was always in awe of them, and I'm in awe of the consumer survivor extirpation movement in general. I think we've come a long way. We've created so many alternatives, not just for the system, but for us. These are things that we think support us as we go on our journey of growth in our lives. So it's not just let's create a thing, a service, because it's a great thing. But it is a great thing, but we work very, very hard. This is why I take issue with peer support being like, oh, that's so cute, nice little thing. Because peer support is hard work. Because you're working on yourself. You're working on creating something that you want to be out there in the world, so other people like yourself can experience that through alternatives, through services that you have created that other people can benefit from. I just think it's like a beautiful thing. And on the left side, that's I don't have a lot of pictures, and I'm looking for a lot of pictures of Jackie. So if anyone has any, just send them my way. But this picture at the bottom with me and Jackie, we were at a NARPA conference. And I remember Jackie saying that the NARPA conferences needed more people of color. And I think that has changed a lot over the years. But at the time, all of us need to be exposed to what NARPA offers, and to understand what disability rights are, what the going mental health laws are, all the issues that are really, it's a very important conference, NARPA. But if it's only shared with just me and Jackie, it defeats the point, How do we get more people involved? Sometimes it's economic, and I think it's sort of changed a little bit. Because sometimes the NARPA conferences, because they don't get government money, is expensive for some people, or people who are on, either working class or disability, but we want them to all get the information. We want them to be a part of it. And like I said before, exposure is so important in networking and meeting people and sharing ideas and learning from people. And this is what I have always been doing through NARPA and this conference and other conferences, you know. So other thing I want to mention is we weren't doing it so much, but people of color, and I'll say the term we're using now is BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous People of Color. Is it not all of us wind up in the mental health system? We do. But there's times when we may just go in the criminal justice and may go to prison. We may be homeless. We may be on substance use. And all of this is a part of who we are. And it's an intersection. So it's like, this is the life that we experience. We want to share that. It's not just about mental health, although it is, and trauma. But it's about accepting what our experiences are and trying to figure out how do we all work together in all these different systems that we have experienced. How do we learn from each other, from a peer who's been in prison, which we have a lot now than we did. Have a lot of peer specialists and a lot of other consultants and people who are working on criminal justice. There's so many movements that we can be a part of that we can connect to. It's just a pretty picture. It's autumn here in New York. And I want us to see a lot of beauty. And I like to see a lot of beauty. It helps me through my day. And surviving race, just briefly, we had well, in 2014, which was not a good year, that a lot of African-American men and women were being killed by the hands of police. And it was an ongoing crisis. It was, you know, Michael Brown, it was Eric Warner, it was Sandra Bland. It just kept going. David Prude in Rochester. There's so many to mention. And when things happen for me, sometimes I want to help to get support and help to resolve it. So I want to create something. So I got together some movement leaders and said, what are we going to do about this issue of white allies and BIPOC or people in our movement together? We all need to work together. What are we going to do to change this? And who better to do it than us? Because we've gone through so much, and we've taught so much. If we created so much, who better than us to help resolve this issue? So we created, I'm founder of Surviving Race, the Intersection of Injustice, Disability, and Human Rights. We have a Facebook page. We have over 1,000 members. We really grew. And one of the things we would do is we created something called Stop Calling the Police, because we realized that in every place, New York and everywhere, when there's an emergency, even if it's not an emergency, hang up and call 911, right? And we just, you know, they can't be charged with that. That's a habitual thing that we all do, but they're not the ones to call in crisis. And when a family member calls a loved one who's having, emotional crisis, having some distress, having an altered state or something, the police come and they're supposed to help, because the family member or the loved one, significant other, called them to help, but they're not equipped to, that's not their role, is to help in a crisis. In terms of, their thing is to, what the training is to help with the violence and anything that happens. Now, sometimes, I've heard, and it's happened, there's some people who weren't doing well and may have lunged into someone, to the police, had a knife, but maybe you want to taser them, or to calm them down. But why do you want to kill them? Why are you? What makes you responsible for taking somebody else's life? So this is what we're all dealing with, especially people who are BIPOC, people who are queer, non-binary, the LGBTQIA community. We're all dealing with it. People with disabilities, which is a part of surviving race. We're all dealing with different issues. And so doesn't mean I have to bend through your same experience or your walk of life to understand your humanity, and that you deserve to be who you are. I don't have any right to change it. No one does. Of course, people do, but that you can be here, and I want to promote that as well. I want us all to work together. So I work together with a lot of people from our movement with surviving race, people with disabilities, the LGBTQIA community, people with disabilities, peer advocates, peer specialists, anybody who wants justice in police brutality. It really needs to stop. The way we're perceived, all of us, whether we're a person of color or not, as someone who's perceived with a mental illness, that's a problem. And it's been an issue for a long time. And now it's become violent. It's violence. It's nothing about healing. So this year in August, towards the end of August, I helped with Jen Patrone and others on our planning committee to create a dialogue. We got some funding from Open Excellence and some really wonderful peer organizations to help us with this, to help us create a dialogue. And we chose Savannah, Georgia, which is a wonderful, beautiful place. I've never been there, but it's historical. To really sit down in a dialogue and focus on structural racism. What does that mean? How can we work together, nationally and in our local communities, which is important to work on? How do we deal with privilege? White privilege or any kind of privilege. How do we look at ourselves, all of us, and bring something out there to share that people can learn from? These things are not easy to do and to discuss. We had a lot of debriefing sessions. We talked about peer support. We talked about the history of the consumer survivor expiation movement, where it is now, where it's going. We had a lot of different people there. And we asked people who were actually coming, we had 25 people, who would like to facilitate these different dialogues. And we had one about othering, diverse communities as well. So these are the kind of chosen dialogues we had. We will have a report out soon so everybody can read what happened. But the way we handled the facilitators, that we had someone from the BIPOC community or the LGBT community partnered also with a white ally together. And I think that was a good thing. We had a lot of people of color in leadership roles, which they don't always see themselves in, actually the lead facilitator in the dialogue. So it was a wonderful experience. And this picture, there's many pictures, okay? But this picture, I love. You could see in the middle, that's my son next to me. He came with me to support me. He also learned a lot. He's a part of the next generation. I'm so proud of my son, Kevin. That's me. That's Jonathan Edwards, Taina Lang on the end, up and coming. She's now chair of the NIASRA's board. I mean, so we've come a long way. We still have a lot to go. And then Gita Enders, she was part of it. So we're making strides. We're making change. We're doing the best we can. A lot of this is exhausting. To continually deal with trauma and police brutality and killing us and crisis is something that we have to continue to work on. Now that we have social media, this has always been happening. This, we see more than we might have before. So the last 3 years, we've all experienced COVID, right? But we as a community, all of us, I just think we're all awesome, whether I know you or not. If you're doing some great things. If not, it's just who you are. Everybody, you are not. That's it, But, we're very creative people. See, COVID to me, crystal cleared so much for me. That these things have been happening before. There's been racial and health disparities forever, and now we see it more so. We see people involuntarily committed. We've always seen it, but we see it even more. We see people going through grief. Because, I've had a couple loved ones who died of COVID, and I know friends and colleagues that have also had that happen. It was a devastating time. And, who do you look to for all of this? And, it was hard to look, because nobody knew the answer. How do we combat COVID, eventually got a vaccine, et cetera. But one of the things that we did is let's create self-care, like peer support. Now we're in self-care to help us through this. Because remember, we all had to stay home. We were afraid to go out. Don't go out. Stay home. Everything was virtual and everything was Zoom. And we're people who are used to seeing each other and conversating with each other and loving each other and hugging each other. And it was difficult to do. We did get through it through Zoom or through other virtual means. So one of the things that I think was the first to do is Surviving Race. We created a whole Surviving Race peer support crisis network and just had all these different dialogues with a lot of us facilitating dialogues. One of the things that I'm really proud of that we had was reframing crisis, peer support, self-care, and community care. We realized during this time that we can support each other. And we can have a facilitator, we can have group agreements, we can work together, and we can figure out what is self-care for us during this time. What is it for you? Is it, listening to music, relaxing, doing yoga? What is it for you that supports you? And community care. It's not just us, but the social isolation really was very harmful for people. And how do we connect with people who are older and not in the digital age, like my mom? and, talking with her, talking on the phone, just really remaining connected. It could be depressing, or, being just by yourself and feeling isolated. So we did that. We During this time, it's already happened, but emotional CPR was happening. So many different trainings were happening. IPS, intentional peer support, was doing a lot of trainings. RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, was doing a lot of trainings. And I'm going to say, for my own hometown, New York, I no longer had to say, oh, wait a minute, I don't have a resource, it doesn't exist. No, peers were creating their own support, doing, support groups for peers who are working, doing that, having what we call PIP, peers in person, expanding people in the community, like going to Central Park or going somewhere with our peers. We could do it ourselves, so we don't need anyone to do it. We can do it. That's the beauty of everything that's happened in COVID. We were able to survive and create all of these new alternative services. We have the Hearing Voices Network, and that was seen even more. Hearing Voices Support Group. We've had, the Black Psychologists Association create healing circles that people can go online that really support. We had different kinds of groups. And of course, peer-run respite and Soteria. We were doing also alternatives to suicide. And that was developed by Wildflower Alliance. And that's incredible. That's incredible, to create things that we know that may be working for us, that work for others, and then train others to do it. Is just incredible. I think we're awesome, all of us. So peer support continues in my life and others. And thank you. Follow your dreams. They know the way. And I'm here to answer any questions or have a conversation.
Thank you so much, Celia, for your wonderful talk. It was wonderful to learn a bit more about the history of the peer survivor movement, and wonderful to see the photographs of you with many of the people whose names I've heard, and have your photographs with them, and the ways in which their influence on you has informed your perspective on being a survivor and peer support. So as a a voice here, and someone who is very involved in the Hearing Voices movement, and also very involved with ISPS US, which is a virtually entirely white organization, I was keenly aware as you were speaking, and was very grateful when you began talking to the fact that the issue of race is an extremely important and powerful factor in the ways in which we are perceived. The book Protest Psychosis, and at the moment I'm blanking on the name of the author, but it really, the fact that Blacks during the civil rights movement, Black Power movement, the diagnosis of schizophrenia moved from being a diagnosis applied primarily to white women to Black men, because they were deemed dangerous, and the ways in which the various ways in which we manifest our fears in society is stigmatized, and therefore attempts are made to contain our often, as we have learned during this conference, very clear and correct fears and outrage against the systems that exist. And one of the things that we would like to do within ISPSUS, certainly among the leadership, the executive committee, and with our wonderful new staff support and cheerleading, is to diversify our organization, not only bringing more people who have the with lived experience, who have the courage to continue speaking out, even as we move, even as they, I'm way too old, but even as they move through their lives and their careers. But also, how can we, given your experience and your wisdom, how can we begin to do that process? And putting you on the spot in front of an audience, we would love to consult with you to begin to do some of that work. But I'm going to stop speaking, and it would be great if you would speak a bit more about your vision for how we might all work together, and considering elements of privilege, the various ways in which each of us has privilege, and in many respects, given that we are in this particular forum, the ways in which we have felt oppression or seen oppression in a way that has been very powerful and has transformed us.
Thank you. I've been thinking about this for a very, very long time. I think that we all, like you said, we have to look, I have to look at myself. Look, what kind of privilege do I have? What kind of biases do I share? I think we all have to do that first. I think what I've learned through working in this with our white allies is they understand that they do have privilege based on their skin color. They just have it. And that they want to recognize it, own it, and then they want to work with us to understand what it is that we're going through. So we have people who work on it, on themselves, and I work on it all the time. It's not perfect. Things happen. There's many different articles out now about it that we haven't had in the past to really, form an opinion and get a knowledge base on how to move forward with it. But I just feel like, my vision is that we're not going to survive as people if we don't all work together and understand our differences. We don't have to be the same. You don't even have to understand truly everything that I've been going through in terms of racism and others, because it's not easy for you to understand, but you can be empathetic. You can understand that this happens. And that a world will not change unless we all get together and say everybody has a right to be here and to be who they are, to have differences. We can ask questions of you if we don't know, but it can't be on any one person. So I'm going to give you the African American history. No, you look it up and then come and ask questions of me, because it's exhausting. It's exhausting to go through every culture, and try to understand it, because it's always evolving. So I could be looking at the history, but it's evolved. Or you're a different person than what it is says you are in your culture. You could, we're all evolving. We're different. It's okay to be different. I think we have to get away from ableism. That's a new word that I'm using, because there's people with disabilities and people who should be here. It doesn't have to come to a standard that we have to look, quote, normal like everyone. We can be different and we can thrive together. We can work together to fight, racism and privilege and violence and mental health. There's all intersections with us. So we're working together. So it's not an African American problem. It's all our problem. So it's not an Asian or Native American. It's my problem too. I'm in that. Now, what can I do to be helpful? And I'm gonna ask you rather than coming in and saying, yeah, I think this should happen. You should be doing that. No. What can I do to support you? What is it that I can do? So I'll stop there. I hope that made sense.
It does. Thank you. I understand from Leah that there are no questions in the chat, but if there are questions in the room, I will be happy to bring you the microphone. And also thanks to Jessica Aranella for writing in the chat that it was Jonathan Metzl who wrote Protest Psychosis. So are there any questions from the room? Okay, we have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation, which was very, I learned lots about it and it was very moving too.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I mean, well, let me just ask one because we don't have enough time. Probably in the peer support groups, you've seen people who have, been to therapy or psychotherapy,
Sure.
even with people who do not, practice according to the medical model and its understanding of extreme states, right? So my question would be, what do you think psychotherapists have to learn from peer support groups, in your opinion, in the way they practice? Beyond telling people where they work with, well, you can go to a peer support group, right? That's going to be helpful. But in the way well, I'm a psychotherapist, right? So in the way we practice, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that psychotherapists need to know that peer support can work. It works for people, just as psychotherapy also works for people. And that I think when the person knows that you as a psychotherapist or others really supports peer support, that you know it gives another dimension to what their recovery and their healing is going to be. Because I always say that when over the weekend, you don't always see a psychotherapist, you know, but you know, you're not going, out to eat and to a restaurant or movies. But the psychotherapist can do well to really help expose them to the community, things that they can be doing in the community. And so that it would be like peer support, psychotherapy, maybe going in different directions. But if they come together, they both respect each other's discipline and that they feel that, people are healing from peer support and they could be healing from psychotherapy. It's not like either or, but it's together. It's a partnership. I hope that explains it. I'm sure I could say more to it, but
Thank you so much, Celia. We are at the end of our time. So,
Oh, and I just want to say hi to Jessica Arnello too. So hello, my friend, colleague.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone.